In conversation with Michael Kennedy. Born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Michael lives in Delaware but has maternal roots in South Carolina. He has had a love of poetry and writing since the third grade. Michael continued writing and published student magazines through his undergraduate at Harvard and then before entering medical school. He continued creating writing informally throughout his residency and fellowship. Micah began writing short stories in 2002 and eventually started writing his first novel in 2019. Micah has always loved a well-told story that stretches his imagination, from The Eye We're Watching God to Parable of the Sower, and from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to Pan's Labyrinth. He marvels at human existence at the boundaries of possibility and seeks to bring this magic into his own writing. Dreams from Lake Chagrin is a story where passion, greed, and spirituality intersect with global warming. Married and with multiple cats, Michael practices occupational medicine in the Paladipia area. He is a son, brother, husband, father, uncle, and grandfather who enjoys travel, good food, photography, African art, jazz, and smiling faces. Born the same year The Twilight Zone premiered on television, he can't foresee retiring. He feels he's eating his stride. And on today's episode of our interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today, Michael Kennedy. How are you doing, Michael?
And Peter, how are you? It's good to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, so Michael, could you tell us about your time travel novel, Time Conjurer? How does this book come about? I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to write Time Conjurer? And if you have a copy there, you can show to the
Yeah,
camera.
right.
Beautiful
Okay.
cover.
So, Time Conjurer is about a man who has to time travel to find an aunt who he and everyone believed had died because she disappeared in 1955. It's
Oh,
only when someone travels from 1955 to 2019 that he realizes she may be alive. So
wow.
the only way he can do time travel is through using a hoodoo method and uses photographs as portals and goes back in time.
Mm.
So he has to find his great aunt, but the woman who came looking for her, hunting her actually, is evil and actually needs to be stopped because she's what we call Jim Crow, which is basically a Southern racist that believes in white supremacy and may cause havoc in the 20th century and
Wow.
21st century.
Wow. I love the sound of that. Sounds quite captivating and very pulling to me. So thank you for, especially you mentioning the Voodoo, using for time travel. Sounds quite, beautiful to me and quite compelling, intriguing as well. Now, why do you use Odo in the book and what research did you do? I don't know if you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah. So hoodoo is actually an African American based spiritual and
Yeah,
medicinal practice that
yeah,
is based on African traditional religions.
absolutely.
And it's something that is known to Black Americans, but more so ingrained into the reality of Southern Black Americans, but also into it's something that white Americans picked up as well. So I thought it was something that needed to be used because it does reinforce our spiritual roots.
Mm.
And it seems to have lost some of its gravitas. So I thought it would be good to incorporate it because it's something that's ours. And it's something that if we go back into 1955, I'm sure plenty of us were practicing in the South. It may have been more commercialized and diluted over time gradually, but its roots in African Americans and enslaved Africans runs pretty deep. And I thought it was something that would allow for kind of again, a system by which someone could actually do the things that needed to be done, which is time
Wow.
travel. There wasn't someone with a bunch in a laboratory with a bunch of test tubes and electrodes and electric machines, just using the techniques that we have, which some people call magic, but actually is part
Yeah.
of our heritage.
Wow. That sounds quite great to me. Now I'm quite, intrigued to hear about that from you and the incorporation of Voodoo in the book. Sounds quite lovely. And I'd like to ask you to Michael, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and of course without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect in terms of themes and subject picking up the book?
Right. So first of all, the main theme is growth of the protagonist from someone who had peripheral knowledge of hoodoo to someone who becomes uh, more well versed and actually can be somewhat of a practitioner. He's
Oh.
also going to be learning from his elders how this works. And this is kind of how a lot of the African traditions were passed down and African
Mm,
American traditions were passed down was through familial passing of knowledge.
mm,
Other themes, of course, are things like racism in the South. I didn't want to go back to the slavery period because I wanted people to be free enough to move about, but still experience some of the problems, social problems that we had as Black Americans then. But
mm.
also, it was kind of the dawn of the civil rights movement. So some of the things that people were able to do um, obviously aren't the things that we could do now. We couldn't march and protest as clearly and easily as we could. So some of those things will come up in terms of some of the wrongs that were done and some of the ways that we try to overcome them.
Mm.
But again, the other thing is I wanted a story that was Afrocentric in its
Wow.
origins because I open books, I open book sites, I turn the television on, I look at the news media, the print media. I don't see very many Black faces. And
Mm.
one of the things that struck me as being just impossible and improbable is that all these great, crazy, strange things happen to a white family in Kansas or someone on a farm somewhere.
Oh.
And the Superman novel and story become a family in Kansas, a meteor falls, and there you have it. On and on and on and on. I'm thinking, well, great things happen to other people like us,
Mm.
and we have to rise to the challenge to accept to accept and change the things that happen with that new
Absolutely.
event.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite great, really. I love your, explanation on this, and thank you so much for bordering the fact of this. Sounds quite beautiful to me. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. And now, Micah, there's this question that I love asking authors that come on my show. I've always been fascinated and surprised by how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and bring words together, in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. And this sometimes leave me thinking about how exactly they got their ideas and inspiration. Now as far as writing is concerned, I would love to ask you too, how do you get your inspiration and ideas? Where do they come from?
Uh, just um, for me, the first thing was understanding that we all seek to be free of some of the everyday burdens in which to free ourselves of feeling either trapped in a box or on the treadmill of life. So one of the
Absolutely.
things that made me use photographs was you look at a photograph, what do you think? That was a great day. That was a great time. I really miss him. I really
Absolutely.
miss her. What if I could go back there?
Mm,
Okay. That was the first thing. Um, and so I wanted a photograph because it seems as real as you can get, as opposed to a painting, which it looks like somewhat of a facsimile.
yeah.
Um, and again, I did do some research, and I was doing genealogy research at the time, and so I thought the family theme would be very important because I do have roots, like you had said, in South Carolina,
Mm,
and some of the things that we learned about my great 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 grandfather, for example, is that he had an arduous route, buying his freedom and then being a minister. So the spiritual things that sustained us, I think, are important. So I tried to use all those things and make the story richer in that way.
Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for, answering your question. And I love your answer to this question, really. I love your take on it. So thank you for sharing. And now
Mhm.
I'd like to ask you, Mike, apart from Time Conjurer, do you have any other works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
So I did finish the sequel. I plan on releasing it later this year. I'm going to go through it one more time just to make sure it's as good as it can be because we finished it last, I think, late October, early November. And obviously, I couldn't release two books within a few months. So we're going to wait until maybe Labor Day, which is the end
Mm.
of August, early September of this year. I did write a short story. It hasn't been picked up by anyone yet, but I'll keep trying. The other thing I'm doing is I'm writing poems to some of the many photographs I've taken. So what I'm doing is I'm posting them every week to my followers, and then the week after I put them out on my Facebook page.
Interesting.
So I was told recently that's called akphastic, I think, poetry. Let me make sure I get that right, so that people understand what I'm talking about. So I'm sorry, ekphastic,
Mm.
EKPHRAT, right? Epiphastic poetry. So
Oh,
when I travel, I take pictures all the time, and I'm always looking for
wow.
something that is either meanings that are beneath the surface or things that are just very, very different. And there's always multiple layers to the meaning of any picture. And everybody's, of course, doing, still lifes with fruit or plants or something. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's mountains and fountains and that kind of thing. So I've
Yeah.
been doing that every week. So at the end of the year, I figure I'll probably have a book, at least 52 different poems and photographs that
Wow.
I can create as another book. So
Wow, wow, that's amazing, really. And picking up from what you said about you having a sequel to it, want to make me to ask you, how much more should we expect in the book? Should we be expecting, say, like two more books or three more books, or how many series do you plan it's gonna be in total?
I think three at this point because I started working on the third one, but I had to
Oh,
stop to go back and sell this one. I mean, I have to give this one some life. So I've done
mhm.
some book readings, one in Boston, one in Philadelphia, and one in the Washington, Baltimore area.
Wow,
So I'm trying to plan some others, but I do have there's a conference or convention, I should say,
yeah,
in Charleston in May that I'm going to as well.
wow.
So I think a series of three is really where we are right now. But the thing about anything that you do as a writer or a creator is there's always new ideas. And
Mhm.
so, I'm a physician, so people are asking me about writing a book based on my work as a physician. And I think about it, but I think, well, that's going to have to be, fourth, fifth, sixth in line because there's
Mhm.
always ideas. And again, the main theme of a book like that, what is it? Is it about someone trying to cheat the workers' compensation system? Is it
Oh,
somebody who is body snatching? Is it somebody who is, what I mean? The main theme would be something relatively different, maybe dark, a little bit dark to kind of give it some
wow.
mystery, so to speak. But otherwise, medical novels need to have something exciting. So that one I haven't worked out yet.
Wow. Wow. That's quite amazing, really. You sound like you have quite a lot of works ongoing, quite a lot of books you're working on. That sounds great to me. That's amazing.
One at a time.
Absolutely. It's a great work
Yeah.
you've got there. And now I'd like to ask you, as authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism of our works. I'm curious to know your opinion about criticism. How do you react to negative criticism of your books if you've ever had one in time past?
I have to be humble enough to understand that it's going to make me a better writer because I didn't go to college or graduate school for arts. So I am a guy who writes and needs an editor to help him make the writing better.
Mm.
So if someone who had an MFA or majored in English, I'd probably be, well, of course I'd be humble, but the point is I'd be more sure of myself,
Mm.
and maybe I'd be a little bit less, well, I don't know, hungry is the word, but I think being a non-writer and somebody who really didn't think writing was going to be part of my life,
Yeah.
I have to be humble because all of this is a gift, and I really have to thank my book coach, Tara Bailey. I'm sorry, yeah, Tara Bailey, and my developmental editor, Nessa Flax,
Mm.
because without them, I kind of wouldn't have had a leg to stand on. So for me, the criticism makes me better because I know I didn't come from a history of writing, except poetry. Now, I was writing poems for girls,
Wow.
romantic poems as a kid. So if that's where I started, that's writing, but it's not literature the way we know it. So
Interesting. Interesting.
mhm.
I love your answer to that question. Sounds quite interesting and quite captivating to me. Yeah. And now I'd like to ask you to Michael, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing the book and also ever since it got published?
Yeah. So first of all, I self-published because the response I got from agents a couple of years ago
Yeah.
was thanks, but no thanks. And we're all supposed to get rejections, and that's fine because again, I know I'm not a trained as a writer, in terms of the formal training. So I knew
Mm.
that there would be some things that would be non-palatable. So, for example, the book is 139,000 pages, and the agents were all saying it's too big. I can't sell that to my publishing
Wow.
house. And I said, fine. I just couldn't stop the story. I mean, it's a long book as that goes, but
Mm.
I decided, number one, I didn't want to wait 3 to 5 years for somebody to tell me we like it,
Enough.
but now you can pare it down. Well, I'll be 65 in April, and I don't want to wait 5 more years to get my first book published. And if the book can get published anyway, I'm
Yeah.
going to do it. So the first thing is perseverance. The second thing is understanding in the timeline uh, what you have to do to get it published.
Absolutely.
And there are obviously, many avenues, whether it's submitting things to various agents, submitting them to contests, et cetera, et
Mm.
cetera.
Yeah.
Um, but I've done that, but I just can't wait until it's accepted by someone, even a small publishing house, because I've
Mm.
tried and I need to keep moving because if I don't, it may be unpublished and I'll be dead and have 5 or 6 books in a library somewhere in my basement in a box that never see
Mm.
the light of day. So I need to do this now, unfettered by the constraints of the traditional publishing uh,
Absolutely. Wow.
uh, access.
Well, I love your take on that. It's not everything you have to wait for someone to get the approval if it's good or not. You've written a book, it's left for your own discretion to decide if it's good enough for publication or not. So, yeah, that's a bold step to take, actually. And I love the sound of that. Hopefully, it inspires someone listening. That would be
Mhm.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd like to ask you to, is there anything that you love to share with the viewers about your books that we did not mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know?
Mhm. So the book is uh, again a family story, um, and again I wanted to have again to be an African American male which is the other thing. African American males are not highlighted in our popular culture. I
Mm.
wanted the protagonist to be someone who looks like me, and he didn't have to be a doctor, but I just thought some of the things he has to do will be medical in nature. So there is some medicine that he's practicing as a psychiatrist that is in the book,
Yeah.
um, and uh, I mean it's just about having fun, and I did enjoy traveling to Charleston to see the place and learn the city in a way that
Wow.
allows me to speak from experience about the places that I mentioned. And for people who look down on Hoodoo, which is kind of where we are, um, in American culture. It's either very interesting or it's non-Christian, so it doesn't work for them. And I've heard that. Actually, I had someone who I was going to work with as an editor say she just couldn't do it, just wouldn't do it. And I get it, because the point is a religious-based medicinal and spiritual practice. Okay, born out of the West African religious traditions, and its cousin is voodoo. Hoodoo is different. So the point is, if those themes of African traditional religions don't work for you, then the book may not work for you. If it scares you, I'm sorry. There are plenty of scary things in horror stories, okay? Whether it's vampires, and trust me, vampires are the antithesis of Christianity and good, which is why the cross kills them, right? Or at least it immobilizes. It's their kryptonite. But a lot of people watch vampire movies, right? So which demon do you want?
And some people actually are of the opinion that, all of these things are falsity, they are fallacy, they are not true, they are not real, etc. But that doesn't stop, the reality that they exist. It doesn't. People's opinion does not diminish the effect of things that are particularly real. Yeah, so it's always interesting to hear people's take on that, and that's quite amazing. And I love the fact that you made. I love your last answer to this question. Sounds great and quite intriguing.
Good. Yeah. I did want to make a statement, and that's kind of what I think I did. Now, the second book is going to continue the Odyssey as it is, because whenever, and this is the thing about the time travel, you figure, and this is the question I thought you might ask is, well, what happens if you change things in time? What's going to happen in the future? Well, that kind of happens, and that's something has to be resolved in the second book. Okay, the third book will be another trip back in time, for a slightly different reason, not quite as sinister, but again, the ramifications of time travel that in the third book, I'm not looking to make them as dire, but in the second book, they've got to fix something that happens in terms of changing events.
Wow. That's amazing, really. That's really amazing. I love your answers to this question. And I'd like to ask you, Michael, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category?
First of all, be persistent. One of the things I remember reading about one author, they said they are very selfish about their time, and you do need to keep the time that you need for this. And I mean, Alice Walker has written, she had her baby, in her lap, and he was vomiting in her lap while she was writing some of her novels. You do it early in the morning when nobody's up, or you do it when everybody goes to bed if you have kids. But I don't have kids, so it's not a problem. But I am busy as a physician, and I've got to review charts after work on weekends. So when do I write? Part of my time off from my day job is when I would write. I have another business that I do consulting on and other exams on. And so Wednesday was the day I could devote to writing and editorial interactions with my editors. But, you have to find the time. You have to continue. And, the thing, writer's block never really happened to me. It was really about getting it right. So you just continue to write and get better every time, and find someone as an editor who will sit down with you and go over everything in depth and drag it out of you. You've got to find somebody who will be tough on you and drag it out of you and make you a better writer and a better person. Because now I look at the world and I see things as a challenge to describe. So whether it's, a tree, elderly woman, a flower, a mother and child, a rainy day. How do you describe those things? So all of a sudden, I'm looking at these things with kind of the prism and microscope of an author, as opposed to just a
Absolutely.
casual viewer.
Yeah, wow. I love that. I love that from you. That's great to know. That's quite amazing. Thank you so much for your advice. And I'm hopeful that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. Now,
Mhm.
Michael, in case we have some people who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of your book, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
Right. So you can get it on Amazon. It's in Barnes and Nobles. Now, Amazon, you can get it as a hard copy and a ebook. I think
Hmm.
Barnes and Nobles right now is an ebook. And there's also a website called BookBaby. BookBaby is who helped me publish, and they do have a site for authors to get Time Conjurer.
Wow.
I was working on a audiobook, and it just didn't work out, so we never got to finish an audiobook. I'd love to get that out because I think that would make it easier for some people. The books I'm
Hmm.
reading these days is all audiobook because I don't really have any time to sit and read uh, to the extent that I would read a whole novel, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I'm reading, I had to take an exam yesterday, so I had to read for that. And I have to do research reading. I've got plenty of books for the first and second book and third book, but I have a good 45 to 60 minutes of travel each way to work, and
Oh.
I've gotten through so many novels. Um, if it was a hard copy, my library would be overflowing, and my
Hmm.
wife would be complaining.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great. That's amazing. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Michael Kennedy's books directly on Amazon, on Barnes& and Nobles, and also on other platform. So thank you so much, Michael, for accepting the invitation to be
mhm.
featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I hope folks can always get back to me. My website is michaelkennedywriting.com,
Hmm.
and you'll see some of the other reviews. You'll see some of the things I'm working on. I do have some posts that I put that are about writing inspirations, etc. But all of these weekly posts, I haven't put them on yet, but I will eventually. My email address is maknomad@icloud.com.
Wow.
So feel free to let me know what you think, and we can always discuss. I'm always open to discussions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. That was great.